The great doors of the Galactic Council chamber opened with a deep rumbling sound. Ambassador Dongwu Kim walked through them slowly, his black diplomatic uniform neat and pressed. His footsteps echoed in the massive room as he approached the center platform where 12 different alien species sat in judgment. The chamber was enormous, built to hold beings of many different sizes and needs. Crystal formations grew from the walls where the Vorthak representatives sat, their bodies made of living mineral that caught and bent the light. Above them floated the Nethrim, beings of pure gas contained in energy fields that glowed with soft colors. The insect-like Quillex clicked and chittered from their raised platform, while dozens of other species filled the remaining seats. All of them were staring at Dongwu with expressions that clearly showed they thought very little of him. Dong-Wu had trained for this moment for 3 years. Earth had spent decades developing the technology needed to reach the stars and make contact with other worlds. He had volunteered for this mission knowing it would be difficult, but seeing the contempt in so many alien eyes still made his stomach tighten with nervousness. "So this is what humans look like," said Ambassador Velthera of the Vorthak Empire. Her voice came from speakers built into her crystal body, and it sounded like breaking glass. Small, weak, covered in that disgusting organic skin. Laughter filled the chamber. It came in many forms: the harmonic resonance of the Nethrim, the clicking mandibles of the Quillex, the grinding sounds from the stone-like Morvac. But it was all the same. They were laughing at him. "Tell us, little creature," said Ambassador Zek 9 of the Quillex hive, his compound eyes glittering with amusement. "What makes your primitive species think it belongs among civilized beings?" Dongwu took a deep breath and stepped forward to the speaking platform. The translation device in his ear buzzed as it worked to convert his words into the dozens of languages needed for the council to understand him. "Honorable members of the Galactic Council," Dongwu began, his voice steady despite his nerves. "Humanity comes before you today seeking membership not because we think we are better than others, but because we believe we can add something valuable to your great alliance." More. Laughter echoed through the chamber. A representative from the reptilian Scarith Dominion hissed loudly. "Valuable? What could a species that has barely left its own solar system possibly offer us?" "We offer diversity of thought," Dongwu replied. "We offer the ability to work together despite our differences. And we offer something that may be rare in the galaxy: the willingness to try to understand others, even when they seem impossible to understand." The laughter grew louder. Ambassador Velthara's crystal form flashed with bright cutting light. "Understanding? Your species cannot even understand itself. You fight wars against your own kind. You destroy your own planet's environment. You have dozens of different governments that cannot agree on anything." "That is true," Dongwu admitted, which surprised some of the council members into silence. "We are not perfect. We make mistakes. But we learn from those mistakes, and most importantly, we never give up trying to build bridges between different groups." "Bridges," sneered Zek 9. "Pretty words from a species that has never faced real challenges. You think your small planetary conflicts have prepared you for the galaxy?" Elder Morveth of the ancient Sularian collective spoke for the first time. His voice was old and tired, carrying the weight of thousands of years. "Perhaps we should test these bold claims, young human. Words are easy to speak, actions reveal truth." A sudden quiet fell over the chamber. When Elder Morveth spoke, everyone listened. He was older than most civilizations, and his species had been part of the council since its founding. "What kind of test?" Dongwu asked, though he could feel that the question was leading somewhere dangerous. "The proving grounds," Elder Morveth said simply. The chamber erupted in excited chatter. Some species seemed pleased by the suggestion, while others appeared shocked. Dongwu had no idea what the proving grounds were, but from the reactions around him, it was clearly significant. Ambassador Velthera's form brightened with what Dongwu was beginning to recognize as excitement. "Yes. The proving grounds of Keth 7. If this human truly believes his species can form bonds with others, let him prove it in the most definitive way possible." "What are the proving grounds?" Dongwu asked, though he was beginning to suspect He might not like the answer. Keth-7 is what your species might call a death world, Elder Morveth explained with clinical detachment. It serves as both a prison and a testing site for the most extreme trials the Council occasionally requires. The planet is home to many dangerous creatures, but one in particular has made it legendary. The Shadow Stalker, whispered a representative from the bat-like Viridian Covenant, and several other council members made sounds of agreement or fear. Zek-9 clicked his mandibles in what might have been amusement. The perfect apex predator, 12 meters long, capable of moving between dimensions and intelligent enough to learn from every encounter. It has killed representatives from every major species in the galaxy. The test is simple, Velthara added, her crystal body now glowing brightly with anticipation. Survive 1 week on Keth-7. If your species is truly capable of forming bonds across species barriers, then prove it by taming the Shadow Stalker. No one in recorded history has ever succeeded. Dongwu felt his mouth go dry. This was not what he had expected. He had prepared for diplomatic negotiations, for debates about trade agreements and mutual defense pacts. He had not prepared to face some kind of interdimensional monster on an alien death world. But he looked around the chamber and saw the expressions on the faces of the council members. They were not just testing his claims about humanity's ability to understand others. They were trying to get rid of him entirely. They wanted him to refuse the challenge so they could dismiss Earth's application without having to consider it seriously. That realization made something stubborn wake up inside Dongwu. His grandfather had fought in the Korean War. His father had been part of the team that developed Earth's first faster-than-light drive. His family had never backed down from impossible challenges. I accept your test, Dongwu said clearly. The chamber fell silent. Even the ambient sounds of the various life support systems seemed to quiet. No one had expected the human to actually agree to face the Shadow Stalker. Elder Morveth leaned forward slightly. You understand what you are agreeing to, young human. This is not a simulation or a safe diplomatic exercise. The Shadow Stalker has killed hundreds of beings. If you fail this test, you will die. I understand, Dongwu replied. But I also understand that sometimes the only way to prove you are serious about something is to put everything on the line for it. Ambassador Velthara's crystal form dimmed slightly, as if she had not expected this response. Very well. You will be transported to Keth-7 tomorrow. You may bring 2 companions and basic survival equipment. You have 1 week to either tame the Shadow Stalker or... She did not finish the sentence, but everyone understood. As the council session ended and the various representatives began to file out, Dongwu stood alone on the speaking platform. He had just agreed to face certain death on an alien world, and he had no idea how he was going to survive it. But as he walked back toward the chamber doors, he thought about all the people on Earth who were counting on him. Humanity deserved a place among the stars. And if facing one impossible monster was what it took to prove that, then that was what he would do. The great doors closed behind him with a final, echoing boom. 3 days later, Dongwu stood on the surface of Keth-7 and immediately understood why the Galactic Council called it a death world. The sky above him was dark red, like dried blood, and thick mist rolled across the rocky landscape in endless waves. The air smelled of metal and something else he could not identify. Something that made his skin crawl with instinctive fear. Beside him, Dr. Hyjin Park adjusted her scientific equipment with steady hands, though Dongwu could see the worry in her eyes. She was Earth's leading expert on alien life forms, and she had volunteered to join this mission without hesitation. Her courage impressed him more than she probably knew. The atmospheric readings are within human tolerance, she reported, checking her instruments. But there are some unusual energy signatures I cannot identify. The electromagnetic fields here are stronger than anything we have on Earth. Sergeant Taemin Lee finished unpacking their defensive equipment and looked around the barren landscape with a soldier's trained eye. He had served in 3 different conflicts on Earth and had seen combat in some of the most dangerous places on the planet. But even he seemed unsettled by this alien world. The ground is too open here, Taemin said, shouldering his energy rifle. We need to find better defensive positions before nightfall. Whatever lives on this planet will have every advantage over us in open terrain. Dongwu nodded and looked up at the sky, where he could see the Galactic Council's observation station orbiting the planet. He knew they were watching everything through advanced sensors, probably taking bets on how long the humans would survive. The thought made him angry, but he pushed the feeling aside. Anger would not help them complete their mission. There, Hyojin pointed toward a cluster of tall black rock formations about a kilometer away. Those obsidian spires would provide cover and high ground. We can establish our base camp there. They began walking across the rocky terrain, their boots crunching on loose stones and crystalline fragments that littered the ground. The mist swirled around them as they moved, sometimes thick enough to block their vision completely, then clearing suddenly to reveal strange shapes in the distance. "This place feels wrong," Taemin muttered, his rifle ready as he scanned their surroundings. "Like something is watching us." "Something probably is," Hyojin replied matter-of-factly. According to the data the Council provided, Keth 7 has several apex predator species. But the Shadow Stalker is the most dangerous because it has learned to hunt every type of prey that has ever been brought here. "How many attempts have there been to tame it?" Dongwu asked as they climbed over a ridge of sharp volcanic rock. 17 official attempts over the past century, Hyojin answered, consulting her datapad. The Vorthak Empire sent a full squad of their crystal warriors. They found the remains scattered across 3 kilometers. The Quilix tried using a hive mind approach with 12 of their best hunters. None survived past the first night. Taemin shook his head grimly. "And we are supposed to succeed where trained warriors failed. We have something they did not," Dongwu said quietly. "What is that?" Taemin asked. "We are not here to conquer or prove our strength. We are here to understand." They reached the obsidian formations as the red sun began to set, turning the already crimson sky into something that looked like the inside of a furnace. The rock spires rose 30 meters into the air, their surfaces smooth and black as mirrors. Between them were smaller caves and crevices that would provide shelter. Tai-Min immediately began setting up their defensive perimeter, placing energy barrier generators at strategic points around their campsite. The barriers would not stop a determined attack, but they would slow down most predators long enough for the humans to respond. Jin assembled her scientific monitoring equipment, including motion sensors, atmospheric analyzers, and communication arrays. "If the Shadow Stalker comes near us, we will know about it," she said confidently. But as night fell over Keth 7, Dongwu found himself wondering if early warning would do them any good. According to the Council's data, the Shadow Stalker could phase between dimensions, making it nearly impossible to track or predict. It was also highly intelligent, capable of learning from each encounter and adapting its hunting strategies. The indigenous population called it the Void Walker, Hyojin explained, as they huddled around their small heating unit. The few records that exist suggest it was once part of a pack species, but this one has been alone for decades. Isolation may have affected its behavior patterns. "Alone for decades," Dongwu repeated thoughtfully. "That might explain why it has become so aggressive. Social creatures do not handle isolation well." "You sound like you feel sorry for it," Taemin said, checking his weapon's power levels. "Maybe I do," Dongwu admitted. "Think about it. This creature has been trapped on this planet, forced to kill anyone who comes here with no contact with its own kind. That would drive any intelligent being toward violence." Hyojin looked at him with surprise. "You are talking about it like it is a person instead of a monster. What if it is both?" Dongwu asked. Their conversation was interrupted by a sound from the darkness beyond their camp. It was not loud, but it seemed to come from everywhere at once. A low, harmonic vibration that made their bones ache and their hearts beat faster. All 3 humans froze. Taemin slowly raised his rifle while Hyojin checked her sensors. The reading showed nothing, but the sound continued, rising and falling like some kind of alien song. "Motion detectors are not picking up anything," Hyojin whispered. But the dimensional scanners are showing massive distortions about 50 meters to our north. It is here, Dongwu said quietly. Dot. The sound stopped as suddenly as it had begun, leaving them in complete silence. Even the constant wind that had been blowing across the landscape seemed to have died away. The only sounds were their own breathing and the quiet hum of their equipment. Dot. Then the mist began to move differently. Instead of drifting randomly, it started to swirl in patterns, forming shapes, and then dissolving again. Something was moving through it, something large enough to disturb the air currents but still invisible to their sensors. Sir, Taemin said urgently, we should activate the emergency beacon. Call for extraction. No, Dongwu replied firmly. We came here to prove something. Running away on the first night will not accomplish our mission. But if we die on the first night, we will not accomplish it either, Taemin pointed out reasonably. Before Dongwu could respond. The mist in front of their camp began to glow, with a faint bioluminescent light. The glow pulsed in complex patterns, shifting from deep red to purple to blue and back again. It was beautiful and terrifying at the same time. Bioluminescence, Haijin breathed in amazement. It is communicating something. The color patterns are too complex to be random. Communicating what? Taemin asked, his finger hovering over his weapon's trigger. I do not know yet, Haijin admitted, but this is not typical predator behavior. Most hunters do not announce their presence with light displays. The glow moved closer to their camp, and now they could see hints of a massive shape moving through the mist. It was long and low to the ground, moving with fluid grace that reminded Dongwu of a hunting cat. But it was far larger than any cat, and the way it seemed to fade in and out of visibility suggested it was not entirely present in their dimension. The Shadow Stalker, Dongwu whispered. Dot. The creature stopped at the edge of their energy barriers, and the bioluminescent patterns on its body shifted to what looked like curiosity, softer colors that pulsed more slowly. For several long minutes it simply observed them, and they observed it back. Then, without warning, it vanished completely. The mist returned to normal, the strange lights disappeared, and the wind began to blow again across the empty landscape. Shall I just leave? Taemin asked in disbelief. I think, Dongwu said slowly, it was checking us out. Learning about us. Well, now it knows where we are and how we are armed, Taemin said grimly. Tomorrow night it will probably come back to finish what it started. But Dongwu was not so sure. Something about the encounter felt different from what he had expected. The Shadow Stalker had not attacked when it clearly could have. Instead, it had observed them with what seemed like intelligence and curiosity. Maybe, just maybe. There was more to this creature than anyone realized. As the three humans settled in for a long, tense night of guard duty, none of them noticed the faint bioluminescent glow that continued to pulse in the distant mist, as if something was still watching them from the darkness. The Shadow Stalker returned on the second night, but this time it did not hide in the mist. Dongwu was on watch duty when the creature emerged from what looked like empty air, stepping through reality like it was walking through a doorway. The sight took his breath away. The creature was magnificent and terrifying at the same time. It stood 12 meters long from nose to tail, with 6 powerful legs that ended in claws longer than Dongwu's arm. Its body was sleek and muscular, covered in what looked like living shadow that shifted and moved independently, but it was the head that drew his attention. Elongated and graceful, crowned with sensory organs that pulsed with soft bioluminescent light. 6 eyes arranged around its skull fixed on Dongwu with unmistakable intelligence. These were not the simple eyes of an animal. They held awareness, curiosity, and something that looked almost like loneliness. Haijin, Dongwu whispered into his communicator, not daring to move. Wake up, it is here. Dr. Park's voice came back immediately, alert despite being awakened from sleep. I am reading massive dimensional distortions right at our perimeter. The creature is partially existing outside normal space. The Shadow Stalker began to circle their camp with movements that seemed to flow like water, Its 6 legs carried it across the rocky ground without making any sound. As it moved, the bioluminescent patterns on its body shifted from the aggressive reds and purples they had seen the night before to softer blues and greens. "Tae-min," Dongwoo called quietly. "Are you seeing this?" The sergeant's voice was tense, but controlled. "I see it, sir. Should I activate the defensive systems?" Dongwoo watched the creature's graceful movements and felt something unexpected, not fear, but fascination. The shadow stalker was not behaving like a predator preparing to attack. It was moving like something that was genuinely curious about these strange visitors to its world. "Wait," Dongwoo said. "Look at its body language. It is not hunting. It is exploring." "Sir, that thing could kill us all in seconds," Tae-min protested. "Every report says it is the most dangerous predator in the galaxy. But it is not acting like a predator right now," Dongwoo replied, studying the creature's movements. "It is acting like something that wants to understand what we are." The shadow stalker completed its circle of their camp and stopped directly in front of Dongwoo's position. The energy barrier hummed between them, but the creature made no attempt to test its strength. Instead, it lowered its massive head and tilted it to one side. Studying the human with obvious intelligence, Dong-Woo made a decision that probably should have terrified him. He stood up slowly and walked toward the edge of their defensive perimeter. Behind him, he could hear Tae-min's sharp intake of breath and Hee-jin's urgent whispers as she tried to understand what was happening with her instruments. "Dongwoo," Hee-jin's voice was tight with concern. "The energy readings are off the charts. That creature is not entirely in our dimension. It could phase through our barriers without any effort." "I know," Dongwoo replied softly, "which means it is choosing not to attack us." He reached the edge of the energy barrier and stopped. The shadow stalker was less than 3 meters away now, close enough that he could see the intricate patterns in its bioluminescent organs and the way its eyes tracked his every movement. This close, he could also sense something else, a presence that touched his mind gently, like a whisper at the edge of consciousness. "Hello," Dongwoo said simply, his voice carrying clearly across the misty landscape. "My name is Dongwoo." The creature's response was unlike anything Hee-jin had ever recorded in her xenobiological studies. It was part harmonic resonance that made the air vibrate, part subsonic rumble that he felt in his bones, and part something that seemed to speak directly to his mind. Her translation equipment struggled to process the complex communication, but after several seconds, words began to appear on her screen. "Curious one who shows no fear scent," was the rough translation that appeared. Dong-Woo felt a smile tug at his lips despite the dangerous situation. "You can smell that I am not afraid?" The shadow stalker's bioluminescent patterns shifted to what looked like amusement, quick flashes of lighter colors that pulsed in what might have been the creature's version of laughter. When it spoke again, Hee-jin's translation was clearer. "Small, warm one, carries different scent than others who came before. Others carried fear, anger, pain scent. You carry curious sadness, hope scent. Others came before us," Dongwoo repeated thoughtfully. "The warriors from different species who tried to fight you." The creature's lights dimmed, and its next communication carried notes of what sounded like regret. Bright crystal ones came with cutting light weapons. They tried to harm kill before speaking. Buzzers with many eyes came with trap tools and poison stings. All came to prove strength through violence. "But we did not come to fight you," Dongwoo said gently. "We came to understand." The shadow stalker's head tilted further, and its 6 eyes studied him with even greater intensity. "Understand meaning unclear. Others came to conquer, tame, control. What is understand meaning?" Dongwoo thought about how to explain the concept to an alien intelligence that had apparently never encountered it before. Understanding means trying to know what someone else thinks and feels. It means caring about why they do the things they do instead of just wanting to control them. The creature was silent for a long moment, its bioluminescent pattern cycling through colors Dongwoo had not seen before. When it finally responded, there was something new in its mental voice, something that sounded like wonder. No previous visitor spoke such concepts. All before ones came with purpose of domination or purpose of proving strength. Small warm one speaks of purpose of knowing. Over the next hour, with He Jin working frantically to improve her translation software, Dongwu conducted the most extraordinary conversation of his life. The shadow stalker, which had been alone on this planet for decades, was hungry for communication in ways that went far beyond physical needs. Through broken translations and patient repetition, Dongwu began to learn the creature's story. It had not always been alone. The shadow stalkers had once been a social species, living in small packs and working together to hunt and care for their young. But something had happened to separate this one from its kind, some kind of accident or disaster that had stranded it on Keth 7. Pack bond lost long time ago, the creature explained, its lights dimming with obvious sadness. Void between stars swallowed packmates during hunting flight. A lone one survived but could not return home. You have been alone all this time, Dongwu said, and it was not a question. He could hear the loneliness in the creature's mental voice, could see it in the way its bioluminescent patterns had grown muted when speaking of its lost pack. Alone. Yes. Council beings brought others to fight, but fighting is not communication. Survival required violence against those who came with weapons, but small warm one comes with words, not weapons. Dongwu felt his heart break a little for this magnificent, lonely creature. What do you call yourself? The response was a complex harmony that made Hyejin's equipment struggle, but the meaning that came through was something like song that echoes in the void. Dongwu found himself thinking of the creature as Void Song. Void Song, he said carefully, and the creature's lights brightened with what was clearly pleasure at hearing its name spoken by another being. As dawn began to break over Keth 7's red sky, Void Song began to phase back toward wherever it came from during the day. But before it left entirely, it moved closer to the energy barrier and extended one of its massive claws. Very gently it touched the barrier where Dongwu's hand was pressed against it from the other side. Tomorrow night. Small warm one called Dongwu will speak again with song that echoes in the void. Yes, Dongwu promised. Tomorrow night we will speak again. As Void Song faded from sight, Dongwu turned to find Hyejin and Taimin staring at him with expressions of complete amazement. Sir, Taimin said slowly, I think you just made friends with the most dangerous predator in the galaxy. No, Dongwu replied, watching the place where Void Song had disappeared. I think I just met someone who has been waiting a very long time for a friend. Over the next 3 days, Dongwu and his team established something that had never existed in the recorded history of the galaxy: peaceful communication with the Shadow Stalker. Each night, Void Song would emerge from whatever dimensional space it inhabited during the day, and each night, their conversations grew longer and more complex. Dr. Hyejin Park worked almost constantly to improve her translation software. The Shadow Stalker's language was unlike anything in the Galactic Council's databases. It combined biochemical scent markers that her equipment could barely detect, sonic frequencies that ranged from subsonic to ultrasonic, and direct mental impressions that seemed to bypass normal hearing entirely. The complexity is incredible, Hyejin explained during their 3rd day on Keth 7, showing Dongwu her latest analysis. Void Song does not just speak with sounds or thoughts. Every communication includes emotional context, memory references, and what I can only describe as sensory poetry. Sensory poetry? Dongwu asked, checking their supplies while keeping an eye on the mist-covered landscape around them. When Void Song talks about its lost pack, the communication includes the actual scent memory of how they smelled, the harmonic frequencies they used to call to each other, even the feeling of their mental presence. It is like the difference between reading about music and actually hearing a symphony. That night when Void Song arrived for their regular meeting, Dongwu was ready with better questions. Through patient translation work, he had begun to understand that the creature was not just intelligent, it was deeply thoughtful and capable of complex emotions. Void Song, Dongwu began, settling cross-legged at the edge of their camp's energy barrier. Can you tell me about your world? Your real home? Before you came here? The shadow stalker's bioluminescent patterns shifted to soft golds and deep blues as it settled onto the rocky ground across from him. Its response came through in waves of memory and emotion that Hyejin's equipment struggled to translate. Homeworld called singing fields of starlight. Pack brother-sisters hunted together across crystal plains under silver moon clusters. Harmony songs echoed between pack mines during great hunts and rest times. It sounds beautiful, Dongwu said sincerely. Beautiful, yes, but also dangerous place. So, pack cooperation required for survival against greater predators and void storms. A lone hunter cannot survive on singing fields. But here, Void Song gestured with one claw toward the barren landscape of Keth 7. Here, a lone hunter must adapt, or die quickly. So you learned to survive by yourself, Dongwu said. But that meant becoming something different from what you were meant to be. The creature's lights dimmed with what was clearly sadness. Council beings brought challengers who sought to prove dominance. Fighting for survival became only way to continue existing. But fighting alone always makes song that echoes in void grow smaller and quieter. Dongwu felt his heart ache for the lonely creature. You did not want to be a killer. You just wanted to survive. Survival necessity forced violence against those who came with weapons and anger. But violence without pack harmony left empty spaces in song where pack voices should have been. Over the following nights, Dongwu learned more about Void Song's tragic history. The creature had been part of a hunting party that had ventured into space using some form of natural dimensional phasing ability. They had been caught in what sounded like a cosmic storm, something that had torn holes in space itself and scattered the pack across the galaxy. Void-Song had crash-landed on Keth 7, badly injured and completely alone for the first time in its life. The Galactic Council had discovered it there and decided to use the dangerous predator as a test for their most extreme trials. How many beings have you been forced to fight? Dongwu asked gently. Void-Song, quote, S response, carried such pain that even Taemin, who had been maintaining his usual suspicious watch, stopped to listen. 17 groups of challengers over many season cycles. Some came alone proud. Some came in warrior bands. All came believing violence was only language possible. But you tried to communicate with them first? Always first attempt was harmony song of greeting. But fear scent and weapon preparation action spoke louder than words. Defense became necessary when challengers attacked without listening. Dongwu was quiet for a long moment, thinking about what he had learned. The Galactic Council had created their own monster by isolating a social creature and forcing it to kill anyone who approached. They had turned Void Song's survival instincts against both the creature and its potential visitors. Void Song, he said finally, what if I told you that some of us came here not to fight, but to learn? What if we came hoping to prove that understanding between different species is possible? The Shadow Stalker's entire body brightened with interest. Small Warm One speaks of hope concept that Song has not heard in many seasons. Understanding between different kinds of beings. This is possible thing. I think it is, Dongwu replied. In fact, I think it is happening right now between us. Void Song was silent for several minutes, its bioluminescent patterns cycling through complex sequences that Hyejin's computer could not fully translate. When it finally spoke again, there was wonder in its mental voice. Song realizes truth in small warm ones, words. Communication without violence has created new kind of pack bond. Different species but similar. Recognition of other as individual being. Yes, Dongwu said, smiling. That is exactly what it is. As their conversations continued, Dongwu began to understand that Void Song was not just intelligent, but wise in ways that came from years of forced solitude and painful experience. The creature had spent decades thinking about the nature of communication, the meaning of survival, and the difference between existing and truly living. Council beings watch from Sky Station, Void Song observed during their 4th night of meetings. They expect violence trial to end in death of challengers, but small warm ones create different outcome through patience and listening words. They do not understand what we are doing here, Dongwu agreed. They think strength can only be proven through combat. But Small Warm One proves different kind of strength. Strength to approach unknown without weapons. Strength to listen when others would attack. Strength to offer friendship where others offered only dominance. On their 5th night, something changed in their relationship. Instead of staying on opposite sides of the energy barrier, Void Song asked if it could approach more closely. Dongwu, after a moment's hesitation and against Taemin's urgent protests, deactivated a small section of their perimeter. For the first time, Void Song and Dongwu were in the same space with no barriers between them. The creature moved with incredible care, its massive form somehow managing to seem gentle despite its obvious power. When it finally settled down next to where Dongwu sat, the human could feel the warmth radiating from its body and smell the strange, clean scent that surrounded it. Pack bonding ceremony among Shadowstalkers involves sharing of life, warmth, and song harmonies, Void Song explained. Song offers friendship bond to Small Warm One called Dongwu, if such sharing is acceptable. Dongwu looked up at the creature's 6 eyes, all focused on him with an expression he was learning to recognize as hope mixed with vulnerability. This magnificent being, which had terrified the galaxy's greatest warriors, was asking for his friendship with the tentative voice of someone who had been disappointed too many times before. "I would be honored to share friendship with you, Void Song," Dongwu said quietly. The Shadowstalker's response was a harmony unlike anything Dongwu had ever heard. It started as a low rumble in the creature's chest, then rose through frequencies that made the air itself seem to sing. But more than sound, it was a communication that touched his mind and heart directly, sharing emotions of gratitude, relief, and joy that had been bottled up for decades. As the song faded, Void Song gently lowered its massive head until it rested near Dongwu's shoulder. The gesture was clearly one of trust and affection, and Dongwu found himself reaching out to touch the smooth surface of the creature's skull. Above them, in the Council's observation station, alarms were going off as sensors detected the impossible. A human being in direct physical contact with the Shadowstalker, both of them alive and apparently unharmed. Pack bond created, Void Song said simply. Loneliness ends tonight. Dongwu smiled, feeling tears in his eyes. For both of us, my friend, for both of us. On the 6th day of their trial, the Galactic Council decided that the humans had succeeded too well. Ambassador Velthara stood in the observation station, her crystalline form blazing with angry light as she watched the peaceful scene below, where Dongwu sat talking quietly with the Shadowstalker. "This is not what we intended," she announced to the other council representatives. The human was supposed to attempt to dominate the creature through force, proving his species unworthy of membership. Instead, he has somehow corrupted the test. Elder Morveth observed the scene below with ancient, thoughtful eyes. The human has done exactly what he claimed his species could do. He has formed a bond across species barriers. Is this not proof of what he promised? It proves nothing, Ambassador. Zek 9 of the Quillix Hive clicked angrily. Any creature can be tamed through patience and feeding. We need to see if this bond is real or if it is merely temporary cooperation. Velthara's crystal body pulsed with malicious inspiration. Then let us provide a proper test. Release the Vrex hunters into the testing area. A shocked silence fell over the observation deck. The Vrex were cybernetically enhanced predators from the Quillix homeworld, designed for one purpose: killing. They were fast, deadly, and completely without mercy. That goes against the terms of the trial, Elder Morveth protested. The human was told he would face only the Shadowstalker. The trial was to prove his species could form meaningful bonds, Velthara replied coldly. If this bond is real, then both the human and the creature should be willing to protect each other. What better way to test this than with mortal danger? Before Elder Morveth could object further, Velthara activated the release sequence. Far below on Keth 7's surface, 5 mechanical killers were freed from their containment units and given new programming. Eliminate all life forms in the designated zone. Down on the planet's surface, Dongwu had no warning of what was coming. He was enjoying what had become his favorite part of each day: the quiet hours when he and Void Song shared stories and learned about each other's worlds. Hee-jin was nearby, working on her translation equipment, while Tai-min maintained his usual watch. Pack hunting memories from homeworld bring joy feelings and sadness feelings both, Void Song was saying, its bioluminescent patterns shifting through gentle colors. Joy from remembering harmony with packmates, but sadness from knowing such harmony is lost forever. Maybe, not forever, Dongwoo suggested gently. Maybe someday we can help you find other shadow stalkers or at least find you a new kind of pack. The creature's lights brightened with hope. Small warm one believes such future possibilities exist? I believe friendship can create possibilities that did not exist before, Dongwoo replied. Their conversation was interrupted by Tai-min's urgent voice over the communicator. Movement detected, multiple targets approaching from the east. Fast. Movers' mechanical signatures. Hye-jin immediately began scanning with her equipment while Dongwoo and Void Song both turned toward the direction Tai-min had indicated. Through the perpetual mist of Keth 7, they could see lights moving. Harsh artificial lights that cut through the fog like knives. Those are not natural life forms, Hye-jin reported, her voice tight with concern. I am reading cybernetic implants, enhanced armor and integrated weapon systems. These are military constructs. The Council, Dongwoo realized with growing anger. They have changed the rules of the test. Void Song rose to its full height, its body language shifting instantly. From relaxed friendship to alert readiness, the creature's bioluminescent patterns had changed as well, from the soft blues and greens of contentment to the sharp reds and purples of combat preparation. Mechanical hunters approach with killing intent. Void Song confirmed, its mental voice, now carrying harmonics Dongwoo had never heard before. Council beings have released death machines into trial zone. The first Vrex broke through the mist like a nightmare made real. It stood 3 meters tall on 4 legs, its organic body, heavily modified with cybernetic armor and weapons. Energy cannons were built into its shoulders, and its claws had been replaced with vibrating metal blades designed to cut through any material. Behind it came 4 more identical killers, their targeting systems already locked onto the human camp. Defensive. Positions, Tai-min shouted, activating their energy barriers and raising his rifle. But even as he moved, he knew their portable defenses would not be enough against military-grade hunters. The first Vrex opened fire, its energy cannons sending plasma bolts that lit up the misty landscape. The shots struck their energy barriers and overloaded them instantly, leaving the humans exposed and vulnerable. That was when Void Song moved. The Shadow Stalker's hunting cry split the air, a sound unlike anything it had produced during their peaceful conversations. This was the voice of an apex predator pushed to defend its pack, magnified by desperate love and protective fury. Void Song phased between dimensions and materialized directly in front of the lead Vrex. The mechanical hunter barely had time to register the threat before 12 meters of enraged Shadowstalker crashed into it with the force of a falling asteroid. The battle that followed was swift and terrible. Void Song moved like liquid death, shifting between dimensions to avoid the Vrex's energy weapons while striking with claws that could tear through cybernetic armor like paper. But the creature was not fighting with the cold efficiency it had shown in previous encounters. This time, every movement was calculated to protect the humans behind it. When one Vrex tried to flank around toward Dongwoo's position, Void Song was there instantly, taking a plasma bolt meant for the human and responding with a strike that sent the mechanical killer flying 30 meters through the air. It is protecting us. Hye-jin breathed in amazement, watching as Void Song systematically dismantled the attacking force. Not just fighting for survival, actively protecting us. A second Vrex managed to wound Void Song with a lucky shot from its energy cannon, burning a line across the creature's flank. The Shadowstalker's pain-filled cry made Dongwoo's heart clench, but instead of retreating, the creature pressed its attack even more fiercely. He is hurt, Dongwoo said, starting forward to help his friend. Tae-min grabbed his arm. Sir, you cannot help in a fight like this. You will just give it something else to worry about protecting. Dongwoo watched helplessly as Void Song engaged, The remaining three Vreks simultaneously, its body phasing in and out of dimensions as it fought to keep the mechanical hunters away from the humans. The creature was magnificent in its fury, but Dongwu could see that the wound was slowing it down. The battle reached its climax when the largest Vreks activated some kind of area effect weapon that created an energy field designed to prevent dimensional phasing. Suddenly trapped in normal space, Voidsong was vulnerable to coordinated attacks from all three remaining hunters. But the Shadow Stalker had one advantage the Vreks did not expect. It was not fighting alone anymore. Decades of solitary survival had made it a perfect killing machine, but the presence of packmates to protect had awakened something deeper, the cooperative hunting instincts of its species. Instead of trying to fight all three enemies at once, Voidsong began to herd them, using its superior mobility to position the mechanical hunters exactly where it wanted them. Then, with a harmony cry that made the ground itself vibrate, the creature executed an attack pattern that must have been burned into its genetic memory from countless generations of pack hunts. The remaining three Vreks fell within seconds of each other, their cybernetic systems sparking and failing as Voidsong's claws found the precise weak points in their armor. As the last mechanical hunter collapsed, Voidsong swayed on its feet, clearly exhausted and hurt. The creature turned back toward the human camp, and Dongwu could see the pain in its 6 eyes along with something else. Satisfaction at having protected its new pack. Packmates safe? Voidsong asked, its mental voice weak but filled with concern. We are safe, Dongwu replied, running toward his wounded friend without any thought for his own safety. Thanks to you, we are all safe. As Dongwu reached the injured Shadow Stalker, he realized that something fundamental had changed in their relationship. They were no longer just friends trying to understand each other. They had become something the galaxy had never seen before, a true interspecies pack bond, tested in combat and sealed with willing sacrifice. Above them, the Council observation station was in chaos, as representatives tried to understand what they had just witnessed. For the first time in recorded history, the Shadow Stalker had fought not as a solitary killer but as a protector, and it had done so for aliens it had known for less than a week. The test was over, but its true implications were just beginning. The extraction ship arrived 6 hours after the battle with the Vreks hunters, but Dongwu refused to board until Dr. Park had treated Voidsong's wounds as best she could with their limited medical supplies. The Shadow Stalker's injury was healing, faster than should have been possible, but the creature remained close to Dongwu throughout the treatment, as if afraid its new packmate might disappear. The cellular regeneration rate is incredible, Yijin reported as she worked. I think the dimensional phasing ability allows accelerated healing by drawing energy from alternate space, but it was not the creature's remarkable biology that held everyone's attention. It was the way Voidsong kept positioning itself between Dongwu and any potential threats, the way its bioluminescent patterns brightened whenever the human spoke to it, and the obvious contentment in its posture when Dongwu sat nearby. Packmate Dongwu will travel with Song to Sky Station, Voidsong asked as they prepared for departure. Yes, Dongwu promised. We go together to meet the Council. They need to hear what we have learned. The journey to the orbital station was unlike anything the transport pilot had ever experienced. The Shadow Stalker, which had been the subject of fearful legends throughout the galaxy, traveled peacefully in the ship's cargo bay, its massive form somehow managing to seem gentle despite its obvious power. When they docked with the Council station, Voidsong refused to be separated from Dongwu. The creature followed him through corridors designed for much smaller beings, its dimensional phasing allowing it to adjust its apparent size just enough to fit through doorways without actually changing its physical mass. The Council chamber had been hastily redesigned to accommodate both human and Shadow Stalker. When Dongwu walked through the great doors with Voidsong at his side, the assembled representatives fell into complete silence. Ambassador Velthera was the first to speak, her crystalline form dim with what might have been embarrassment. Human, you were supposed to face only the Shadow Stalker. The release of the Vreks hunters was an unauthorized addition to the trial. I know exactly what it was, Dongwu replied calmly. It was an attempt to make me fail by changing the rules after I had already succeeded. Elder Morveth leaned forward in his ancient seat. You believe you have succeeded in the original trial? I do not just believe it, Dongwu said. I can prove it. He turned to Voidsong, who had been listening to the conversation through Hyejin's improved translation system. My friend, would you like to speak for yourself? The Shadowstalker's response filled the chamber with harmonics that made several species' translation equipment overload. When the meaning finally became clear, it carried a dignity and intelligence that surprised even the most open-minded council members. Song that echoes in void greets council of many species. Long seasons of isolation have ended through friendship bond with small warm ones called humans. Pack cooperation instincts awakened again through understanding and respect freely given. Ambassador Zect 9 clicked his mandibles nervously. The creature speaks of friendship, but how do we know this is not simply temporary cooperation for mutual benefit? Voidsong's bioluminescent pattern shifted to what Dongwu now recognized as gentle amusement. Buzzers with many eyes ask proof of bond strength. Song offers demonstration. The Shadowstalker moved to the center of the chamber, its massive form dominating the space but somehow managing to seem non-threatening. Then, in a display that left every council member speechless, Voidsong lay down on the floor and exposed its throat and belly, the most vulnerable position any predator could assume. Packmate Dongwu approaches without fear. Voidsong said calmly. Dong-Wu walked over to his friend and knelt beside the creature's massive head. He placed his hand gently on Voidsong's throat, directly over the major blood vessels that kept the Shadowstalker alive. In that position, even a small human could deliver a killing blow to the galaxy's most feared predator. The chamber remained absolutely silent as Dongwu demonstrated the complete trust that existed between them. After a moment, he moved his hand to rest against the side of Voidsong's head in a gesture of affection, and the creature's lights brightened with obvious happiness. This is not dominance, Dongwu said, his voice carrying clearly through the chamber. This is not taming or control. This is mutual respect between equals who have chosen to trust each other. Elder Morveth was the first to respond, his ancient voice carrying a note of wonder. In 10,000 years of council history, no species has ever formed a true partnership with a Shadowstalker. They are apex predators designed by evolution to be solitary hunters. With respect, Elder, Dongwu replied, you were wrong about what they are. Voidsong is not a monster or a weapon. He is a person who was forced into isolation and violence by circumstances beyond his control. When offered friendship instead of conflict, he responded with the same desire for connection that exists in most intelligent beings. Voidsong rose gracefully to his feet and moved to stand beside Dongwu. The creature's mental voice carried clearly through the translation system as he addressed the council directly. Council beings created own monster through isolation, punishment, and forced violence trials. Song that echoes in void became killer not by nature choice, but by survival necessity. Packmate Dongwu offered different path through understanding words and patience, gift. Ambassador, Velthara's crystalline form had lost its sharp refracting quality. Her light was now steady and contemplative. The human and the Shadowstalker both speak of things we did not consider. We saw a dangerous predator and assumed violence was its only nature. But you were not entirely wrong, Dongwu admitted. Voidsong is dangerous. He is one of the most powerful predators I have ever encountered. But power does not have to equal violence. Strength can be used to protect instead of destroy. Dr. Hyejin Park stepped forward with her datapad. If I may address the council, our research over the past week has revealed remarkable intelligence in Voidsong species. They are capable of complex emotional relationships, abstract thinking, and sophisticated communication. They are not animals, they are people. People, Elder Morveth repeated thoughtfully. If this is true, then we have committed a great injustice. We have imprisoned a sapient being and forced him to kill others for our entertainment. Voidsong's response was gentle but firm. Song does not seek revenge for past injustices. Song seeks future possibilities for understanding between all species. Packmate Dongwu has shown that friendship bridges greater distances than weapons ever could. The debate that followed lasted for hours. Representatives from 12 species argued about the implications of what they had witnessed. Some, like Velthera, seemed genuinely shocked by their misconceptions. Others, like Zect9, remained suspicious of the human shadow stalker bond. But gradually, as the evidence mounted and as they observed the obvious affection and respect between Dongwu and Voidsong, even the most skeptical council members began to accept what they were seeing. "The question before us now," Elder Morveth finally said, "is not whether the humans have passed their trial. That much is clear. The question is what we do with this new understanding. We learn from it," Dongwu said simply. "We use it to build better relationships with species we do not yet understand. We stop assuming that different means dangerous and start asking what we can learn from each other." Ambassador Velthera's light pulsed thoughtfully. "The human speaks wisdom. We have made assumptions about many species based on fear rather than knowledge. Perhaps it is time to reconsider our approach to first contact protocols." The formal vote for Earth's membership in the Galactic Council was unanimous, but that was not the end of the session. For the first time in Council history, a non-member species was invited to address the Assembly. Void-Song,'s speech was brief, but profound. He spoke of loneliness and the hunger for connection that exists in all intelligent beings. He talked about the difference between surviving and living, between existing alone and being part of something larger. And he challenged the Council to look beyond their prejudices and see individuals rather than species stereotypes. "Song that echoes in void was alone for many seasons," the Shadow Stalker concluded. But Packmate Dongwu showed that loneliness is choice, not destiny. If friendship bond possible between human and Shadow Stalker, then friendship possible between any species willing to try understanding. When the session finally ended, Dongwu and Voidsong found themselves in the station's observation lounge, looking out at the stars through massive transparent walls. Other council representatives and their staff moved through the area, but they gave the unusual pair respectful space. "What happens now?" Dr. Hyjin Park asked, joining them with Timon close behind. "Now we go home," Dongwu replied. "We tell Earth about what we have learned and we start building the future we want to see." "Packmate Dongwu returns to Homeworld," Voidsong said, his bioluminescent patterns shifting to something that might have been sadness. "Song understands necessity, but will miss harmony of pack communication." Dongwu smiled and placed his hand on his friend's massive flank. "Who said anything about leaving you behind? Earth could use an ambassador from the Shadow Stalker species, and I could use a friend who understands what